Good afternoon. Well, I would sacrifice most anything to not have a reason to be here. I am very grateful for your time. The last time I was here, I cried out to you in the whole courtroom in both agony and relief when the jury had found Emily's murderer guilty of what he had done to her. The relief I felt hearing the word guilty 4 times was immense and what my daughter deserved. But before I continue with my statement, I need to know that you know the relief I felt did not last long at all. It quickly turned to terror moments after the jurors were dismissed, when I turned my face toward my sister and Emily's murderer was smiling at me so broadly that I could see every one of his teeth. I could hardly process what was happening. He locked eyes with me and began trying to speak. He tried to be sneaky and silently mouth his words to me until I started screaming to the marshals for help. What he said to me was, "I don't give a fuck, bitch. I'm here. I'm alive." Chaos broke out, yet he continued smiling as the guards tried to quickly remove him from your courtroom. It was then that the deep-seated evil in Brandon, who had just put us all through a trial, making excuses and pretending to have any remorse for what he did, could not contain himself as he shouted out loud, "I'm still alive. I'm alive." There are no words to adequately tell you how this has affected me, but I can tell you that it has shaken me to my core and that I nearly did not come today because of it. It has been a very long time since anything in our lives made sense, though I am still vividly aware of the final days before Emily was taken from us by the lazy, abusive coward convicted of killing her. It was the first Saturday in December, a time that our family became increasingly excited about the upcoming winter holidays and the decades-long traditions we all love so much. This year, in 2018, our usual tradition of bundling up, getting coffee or hot chocolate, and going out to find our Christmas tree was going to be a bit different. Emily had to work. We chatted that Friday evening and decided that we all wanted to keep our plan to set up and decorate our tree that Sunday, and made the decision that Tommy, my husband, Sean, my son, and I would, for the first time in 8 years, go pick our tree without Emily. I remember how she laughed and chatted with Sean on how certain she was that he could pick the perfect tree even if she wasn't there, and she couldn't wait to see what he chose. It was not long after Emily left for work that Saturday morning that she called me. She was very upset and feeling ashamed of herself, wanting to tell me the truth that a few days before she had given Brandon money again. We talked about how hard it was for her to say no, and she explained that she just wanted him to leave town and thought giving him more money to fix his car was what would make that happen. She was feeling powerless and frightened by his demands and planned to have her phone number changed after work. Later that day, my family went to get the tree. Emily worked and she went to AT&T as we had discussed. She arrived home around 7 p.m. exhausted and tearful. I am so glad I had decided to bring home her favorite pizza. And before long, she was laughing, smiling, and having a pillow fight with her 8-year-old brother. She told me that she might go see her friend Rachel that evening, but was not yet sure of her plans. It was about 8:45 when we said goodnight. We both hugged her, and as I left her room, she was taking selfies with our dog Daisy. The next day, Em needed to work again, and we would later decorate our tree. Just as we had done for years, we would laugh and share stories as we took out each ornament. I had been creating an ornament collection for each of my kids since their first Christmas. After 25 years, Emily had quite an array, and Sean loved building his collection too. But that Sunday morning, my husband woke me to tell me that Emily was not home. It was 7 a.m., and unlike her to not send me a message if she would be staying out overnight. After dozens of mine and her father's texts and calls going unanswered, an incredible panic set in. She was 25, Your Honor, with freedom to live her life, but she would never make us worry like this. I called our local police to make a report, and 8 hours later, our lives were shattered. As I watched out the window for Emily's car, the officer I'd spoke to earlier and several more returned to my home. As they approached my home, I remember my face becoming very warm and feeling like I could not swallow. My mind could not process what they were doing at my home, and I have been told that I asked them to leave and go find my daughter, not knowing that that was why they had come. They had found my daughter, who had been shot and killed less than 2 hours after leaving our home the night before. Left there alone on a filthy, desolate oceanfront without any identification. The injury he caused made my beautiful, gentle Emily unrecognizable to anyone, including her own mother. So there we were. My 8-year-old son and I were home alone, as our home filled with police officers, while my husband combed the streets looking for her where her bank card had been used the night before. It will never leave me noticing the man who had a folder in his hand. My son was upstairs, and somehow I had the wherewithal to not let him open the folder until I guided him across my living room, as far away from my son as possible. It was at that time I had to identify my own daughter through tattoo photos taken of her as she lay dead in the sand. There are no words for the agony that unfolded. The crying and screaming is primal. It is what I would equate would happen if someone had physically ripped her from my body. Emily was gone. I would never see her again, and anything I'd ever known or felt was also gone. Emily and I both died, though it was only Emily that left the earth that day. Brandon ended the lives of many innocent human beings who remain here in endless sorrow when he shot and killed my child. Emily was alive and dead within 90 minutes of leaving our home that night, while me, her mom, laid in bed shopping for Christmas presents on her iPad. From a very young age, Emily was truly a bright light. She was compassionate and kind, and she lived her life filled with grace and humility. She found the good in others every chance she possibly could. For 17 years, Emily was my only child, and in 2010, we were blessed with her brother. She was the best sister in the world. Her brothers were everything to her, and she to them. By 25 years old, Em had become my very best friend, and there are times I cannot process how anyone would intentionally step on her foot, let alone end her life. The magnitude and secondary losses of having her taken from us are impossible to describe. And there have been many days where my only accomplishment has been finding the will to wake up and have her gone again. Brandon's actions left me with the most unnatural form of disaster to cope with while feeling like a grenade had been dropped at my door. Nothing can prepare a parent for the death of their child, and nothing can prepare any person for the horror of losing someone they love to homicide. When these things are combined, the trauma, the shock, and the devastation are unfathomable. It's every parent's worst nightmare. And in the decision to murder my child, he took so much. Brandon took the light from my eyes, the strength from my legs, the air from my lungs, the joy from my heart, the trust from my world, and the faith in my God. His actions took my career, where I had spent my life helping children and families who need it so desperately. He stole my identity as a mother and as an individual. I now question every single thing about myself because having a murdered child lives at the core of who you are. And then, Judge Hernandez, I need to tell you about my son, Sean. This man before you leveled an innocent 8-year-old boy just as if he were sideswiped by a concrete wrecking ball. He shattered his heart. He stole his innocence. He no longer feels safe in the world since the one person he loved more than anyone, perhaps even his dad and I, in this earthly world was taken from him. Emily's homicide left him with survivor guilt, as if at 8 years old he could have possibly protected his sister from this evil. He destroyed every norm my son has ever known. He took his and Emily's plans for the future, the ones they had discussed, and the hundreds of things they will now never talk about or be able to do together. Not a single thing is the same. Every moment has had to be recreated as a child who no longer has their sibling to turn to. Brandon caused in him a permanent void that cannot ever be filled. There is not a single thing that will ever make him whole again. And that holiday tradition I shared earlier ended. Sean never got to show Emily that tree. And instead, we spent the next day telling him that his sister had been killed. When I learned Em had been murdered, I felt my soul leave my body. I went into shock and collapsed. A part of me died that December day. And since Emily's death, it has been unbearably hard to keep going at times. The grief of child loss through homicide is so all-encompassing that you risk never finding your way back to life again. There is no getting over such a loss. Parents and family members stumble through the days, months, years following the loss without knowing how to navigate any of it. You don't get over it. All you do is survive while you slowly learn to live with it, to carry the loss, to fight for justice, and to manage the grief as you start to rebuild a new life. A life that remains shattered of before and an after, and it's a journey that no parent should ever have to make. I was not able to protect Emily the night she was shot. I was not able to hold Emily as she died, and I was not allowed to kiss her imploded body goodbye. No matter how many times I've dropped to my knees begging for this nightmare to end, there is nothing within my power that can do that. There is nothing at all that will return Emily to me. She was given a death sentence, and there is nothing that will take me from the soul-crushing life sentence that Brandon has caused for us all. Had the men from the fishing company not seen her that Sunday morning and called 911, her body may have been taken out by the tide. It may have allowed him to get away with what he had done to her, but that, I don't believe, was God's plan for my child and for our family. I don't believe there is any God who could have stopped the evil in him that preyed on and killed my daughter. But I do believe it is God who prevented Brandon from getting away with it, to remain free and hurt more women, just like he had done in 2017, long before killing Emily. As her stepmom said, I am filled with indescribable rage for the decision that Brandon made. He had a lot of choices that night. So many choices. And while he ruined my life and he murdered my daughter, he also did this to his own life. And there'll never be any sense to make from that. I will never forgive him, and I'm okay with that. I actually feel sorry for him because in the last 3.5 years, I've become confident that murder is a sin against God that does not get forgiven. at any time. I'm asking you today to sentence Brandon to the fullest extent of the law that's within your power. I'm asking that your sentence cause him to live his life without the hope of freedom. I'm asking that you give me the opportunity to someday tell my son that the monster in his life will spend every day of his future in the same life sentence that he gave to all of us. Thank you.
That concludes the presentation from the state at this time.